Eric, thank you, man. I really appreciate you being here. We at Pureinfluencer, we love WeDrive Auto. You guys are awesome, and I'm glad that I got you here as the president and co-founder. Tell us about WeDrive. Tell us about your guys' success. You know, give me that insider info.
Yeah, sure. I've got a long track record in the automotive vertical in all things marketing, direct marketing, email marketing, programmatic marketing, digital marketing. And most recently, we were looking for where was there a demand that necessarily hadn't been met in our vertical with consistency, and really it's in and around all things personalized and programmatic marketing. Dealers have had a lot of trouble with that. Dealers have a lack of transparency into their results. Therefore, there's a lack of accountability on the vendor side for a lot of dealers. There's a constant revolving door of vendors, it seems like, in that space. So we really identified a couple of key outcomes that most dealers that we work with desire. And we built some programs around that focus on very specific audiences and market, generate immediate response in a very measurable format. We record all calls, email responses, text messages, appointments from personal URL, microsites, outbound BDCs, lost shopper leads. And we've been able to push that all into one aggregated platform called Audience IQ that helps the dealers get much more insight into whether their ad dollars are working for them in real time. So that's kind of the elevator, 1 to 4th floor, you know, what does WeDrive do, and how we do it a little bit differently than most of our competitors in the space. So that's kind of where it was born. It was born from a demand that hadn't necessarily been met in what I would consider to be the right format for dealerships in our country.
Nice. That's rad. I know that, like, our mutual clients, they love what you guys do. I know our team and our mutual clients, they all love Allie. Allie's a rock star. She's great.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah. So taking it back a couple years, I was fortunate enough to see you in action in a dealership, giving a demo, a presentation. And it was awesome. I told our team that we were with, I was like, look, I want to be able to present like that. And I have you here now. So what are your tips for me and some other people in that in-person presentation? You know, I do a lot of Zoom demos, very different than like an in-person, presentation. So what do you got for me?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you some advice, and it may seem hypocritical based off of how I'm dressed right now. So practice makes perfect, right? Everybody says that. But like, you know, you're a pretty built, you know, gentleman, you work out, it's repetition, right? It's muscle memory. You know, you build up that strength, and then it becomes like an easy thing to get more and more power in whatever that you're working on, right? Your body adapts. It's the same thing with presentations, right? A lot of athletes get into sales because they're committed to a process. Sales is the process. Stand-up presentations is about confidence, first and foremost, having confidence to present in any size audience, whether it's a one-on-one in an office setting, or whether it's in a forum of 500 people. You have to have the same level of confidence in what you're presenting. And a lot of that has to do in belief in what you're presenting. If you don't believe in the product that you're presenting, you can't have confidence to present it with enthusiasm, passion, and energy. And I would say that those things are more important than what is the price of the product, or how quickly can the product, make an impact on the client's business. You will see in most cases that consumers or clients buy off of their connection to your emotion on the product. So my first tip for presenting in person, and something that I've trained dozens, if not hundreds, of salespeople on in my career since I was 21 years old, is having enthusiasm. When you're standing up in front of somebody, you have to be energetic. You have to be enthusiastic about what you're presenting. And if you find that hard to do, if you find it that it's kind of humdrum when you're talking about your product or what your product can do to help whoever you're presenting it to's business, it's probably not a good fit for you as a salesperson. You're never going to be able to present it because you don't have passion about it, you don't believe in it. So that's the first thing. I know you believe in your product, so I think that'll be easy for you and your team to accomplish. The second thing I would say is, first impressions are extremely important. So you might have met somebody 100 times, but when you're presenting to earn their business, there might be 4 or 5 other people that have never met you. They may already have a good background of you. They may have sat in a breakout session at a convention or met you somewhere in the past or even been referred to you. But the other people that are in that office, in most cases, are influential to the final decision. There's a reason that they're there. People want their feedback. And a lot of times when you come into a meeting, and I see this more and more now in the tech era than when I first started my career 16 years ago, where I would walk in and everybody was wearing suits and ties or button-ups or blazers or, at least dressed a higher level of business casual. And now in the tech era, everybody thinks they're Mark Zuckerberg. So they walk in T-shirts and jeans and sandals and sneakers, and they think their product's going to sell itself. If the product sold itself, there would be no sales team in any of these organizations. The Salesforces of the world, the HubSpots, none of them would have sales teams. So the product doesn't sell itself. There's still a matter of relationship that you have to build, and that starts with the first impression. So I always tell people, listen, when you walk in, my salespeople, when you're going to meet with a client, whether it's on a Zoom call, if you're conducting business, if there's a transaction, your goal is to take place, you need to present yourself. So if I was doing this and this was an actual presentation of services, I would have a button down on. I'm in my home, but I would at least present the part, right? If I was working from the office, I might have a button down and a blazer, right? If I'm in person, I might have a button down, a blazer, and depending on the forum or the opportunity or who I'm meeting with, because I've done my research, I might have a tie. But there is a level of, attire that you should always have when you're meeting with an account. I know that seems such a simple tip, but it's the simple tips that kind of win that first impression. So you walk in, you're dressed appropriately for conducting business. You can never be, let me retract that. You can be too overdressed, like don't wear a black tie tuxedo, but you could very rarely, if you're the best dressed person in the room, you're not going to get criticized for it, right? Yeah. So I always tell people, dress the part. And then what happens is that also connects to tip number 1. When you dress well and you feel like you look good, you'll typically present better, right? When I used to play sports, I used to always, have teammates that said, man, I hate these colored cleats or these socks, or man, I hate this, and you know about this, and I hate this jersey setup. And they're like, man, I'm not gonna play good in this, jokingly, because if I didn't feel good, I'm not gonna play good. If I look good, I feel good. If I feel good, I play good. So the same thing in sales. If you come in, you feel like you're dressed well and no one can judge you off your attire, you're going to get a better connection. You're going to feel better. You're going to be more enthusiastic, more energetic. So those are 2 of my immediate tips. And then my third tip, and possibly the most important tip, you got to know who your audience is in a stand-up. Yeah. So if I'm walking into a meeting, and I remember the meeting you're talking about, that you were sitting in the room, and you and Ron were the only 2 people in the room who I didn't know at the time. So it caught me a little off guard because and it wasn't because I hadn't met everybody else. I hadn't met everybody else, but I did my research on everybody else. So I could tell you who they were. I could tell you what their position was. I could tell you what they did specifically for the organization. And the reason why I did that, and I always do that, is because I want to identify what is important to that person to make sure that it's covered in my presentation. One thing that you'll notice, or at least I've been told in my career, is that you answered the majority of the questions that we had for you before we could ask them, right? So it typically means you've kind of done your research, and a lot of that has to do with who you're presenting to. So I always ask a lot of questions up front when I'm about to walk into a presentation, whether it's set by one of my regionals or by a peer or referral, whatever. Who are we presenting to? Who's going to be in the audience? So I can make sure I can have that in the agenda. And what specifically do they do? And then I always like to reiterate it when I get to a stand-up. I always like to take the first 5 minutes to reintroduce myself. And then I always ask for who I'm presenting to introduce themselves. Here's one thing that you'll learn very quickly. If people are willing to spend an additional 5 minutes to introduce themselves, they're interested in what you have to do, because it might be providing a solution to a problem they have, right? So you'll see that those people are immediately engaged. oh, my name is Jen. I do this for the business, boom, boom, boom. And okay, fantastic, Jen. Thank you for, what's the number one problem that you might have with your organization that I could possibly help you with? Okay, perfect. That's what I thought. You can go through 5 people. Now, if it's 150 people, you can't do that. But if it's setting a 1 to 5, you can do that pretty quickly. And what you'll notice is the people that aren't engaged, you have a tougher feat at hand. So when somebody's, let's just skip that and jump right into the presentation. It's a very cold setting, so it doesn't give you the opportunity to warm that up. So that's the other tip that I would leave you with, is do your research, know who you're presenting to, try to know the ins and outs of each person. I mean, I used to go like way too in depth. I would know like where they graduated college. I would know if they were in a fraternity. I would know if they had kids. And I would try to tailor my presentation to that, to where if they had kids, I would walk in and make sure that there was a picture of my kids on the computer screen. Like, when I plugged in, and it was an immediate connection. Like, oh, you have daughters? Oh, fantastic. I have daughters. Oh, wow, cool. Like, but, that's maybe a little bit too far, and maybe with, more and more confidence in and around my product or what I was presenting, I kind of did away with that. But the research part is key, knowing who you're presenting to. So those would be my 3 biggest tips for stand-up, to make sure that you're walking in and you're presenting in person in a way where you give yourself the best chance of leaving with the business. And then the only other thing that I would say is repetition with your own product. So just like you could do shadow boxing, if you're a boxer, you can do the same thing with presenting. You could record yourself with a screen capture and come back and listen to it and say, I didn't like the way that sounded, and tweak it and re-record it, tweak it and re-record it. As I hired sales reps through my career, I always had a 3 to 4 week ramp process where it was all training. It was product, it was pricing, it was what was the solution that it provided. And then there was a level of back and forth where they would have to record things, send them to me. I would tweak things and say, go to minute 114, reiterate this, change this to this. And what happened was they would get really clean scripts down, so where everybody pitched in a very uniform way, but with their own sense of enthusiasm, or passion, or maybe some slight tweaks to their pitch. And that's important for business at scale, is consistency in presentation and making sure, regardless of who you're presenting, you have that cadence down. The best salespeople can present with no deck. So that's the final test for me, is I need you to present the product with no deck. Go. And I need you to cover all the bases, because if you've done enough, you can remember the cadence of how you presented it. And that way, when you're in a setting like a Chamber of Commerce meeting, I've closed my biggest deal ever in a Chamber of Commerce meeting with no deck, sitting at a table next to somebody, right? And it was just talking to somebody, and I literally, in my head, I was going like, I gotta cover this, because I knew the presentation materials. And then when I got a chance to sit with them and their peers for the decision, it was just I repeated the same thing with a slideshow for everybody to see. So that's, I know I've kind of continue to talk, but those are things to me that are extremely important when stand-ups, and I'm passionate about that, because I feel like in today's day and age, everything has lost its connection, specifically with COVID and everything, and it's so important to build a connection before you can actually build your business. So
yeah, no doubt, and that's what I wanted to ask you, and for everyone that's gonna see this or watch this, Eric was he was in a suit, if I recall, and then just tons of confidence. I think that's what caught my attention for sure, and he closed the deal. So so
yeah,
watching, there you go.
Yeah, that's the most important part, right?
Yeah. So a lot of presentations that day. Eric closed the deal. It was really cool. Eric, I appreciate all that info. I'm definitely gonna start recording my demos and send them over to Ron and Ryan and have them critique. I think that's an awesome part where that feedback, in looking back at the video, I think that's awesome. So and I'll do it with the team as well. I think that's a great idea. So I really appreciate your time. I'm stoked for WeDrive Auto. You guys are crushing it. We love what you do. And again, I appreciate you being here. So I will talk to you soon, and don't be a stranger.
I appreciate you having me, man.
All right. Thanks, man.
Take care.